Where to?
Home. I'm going home.
Woman! I don't know where the fuck you live.
Oh.
Hi Halloweenies, I'm Ozzy the Horror Cub. Take a trip with me to Texas because it's time to rank all 8 Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. And I couldn't have done it any other way without being covered in blood, looking like a full-out final girl from one of the series. Sally Hardesty, eat your heart out. August 18th was just a couple days ago. We have to give kudos to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. This is kind of like the godfather of the horror genre. If Halloween really did propel the slasher genre moving forward in 1978, it owes everything to Tobe Hooper's classic 1974 film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This film was gritty, realistic, and spawned a franchise of cannibalistic lunatics that are willing to chase you down with a chainsaw. I can't wait to get into this list. Obviously, my list is going to be different than your list, and that's okay. These films are going to range on different merits for everybody. Some of the films go in a little bit more of a comedic tone, some of them placate more to the gruesome horror, gritty aspect, and some of them are just downright, how did they make that movie? So you're not going to offend me if you don't like my list, but I can't wait to hear your ranking of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. So let me know your ranking down below, and let's get into it. Coming in at number 8, we got 2017's Leatherface. This feels like a Bonnie and Clyde adventure gone extremely wrong. This is not what I want to see in my Texas Chainsaw Massacre origin story. Now again, this is a sequel / predecessor to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D, which was released in 2013, spiritual prequel to the 1974 film explaining the origins of Leatherface. I don't buy this movie for a second. I don't buy this as an origin story. It's kind of like a who's Leatherface as you're trying to figure out who's going to become the titular character. Lily Taylor, love her in the Conjuring films, but she can't save this hot mess. This film to me at times just feels like it's trying to be bloody and gory just for the sake of trying to be bloody and gory just because it's a Texas Chainsaw film. It didn't give me what I needed, and that's why it's coming in at 8th place. Coming in at number 7, we've got Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Leatherface. New Line Cinemas had just acquired the film rights to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, and this is where the film series starts to go into the whole Jason Voorhees route, and they're trying to really push the character into that forefront. I don't think it works for Leatherface. I don't think this film works at all. We're being introduced to a completely new family, so automatically, is this film supposed to be a soft reboot? Obviously, it's a new family. Leatherface doesn't have his brothers along with him. You've got a new house, you've got Leatherface having a kid. This movie is completely out there. The final girl doesn't give me the zhuzh. This film just doesn't do it for me. It's just a pale imitation of what I think a good Texas Chainsaw Massacre film should be, and there was a lot of turmoil going on behind the sets with the firing of the director of this movie, and you know what? It shows in every single frame. This movie to me, it's a step up from Leatherface just because you do have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre formula. However, it just feels like one of those early 90s slasher films, and it's easy to forget. That's why it's coming in at 7th place. Coming in at 6th place, and this might surprise a lot of you, but it's gonna be Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation. It was a straight-to-video sequel of the series. However, the highlights of this film is that it's gonna star Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger. This film was produced in 1994, however, it didn't see the light of day until 1997. It is a shit show of a horror movie. They basically try and take everything that worked in the first 3 Leatherface movies, they cram it into this one, hoping that they're gonna bring something to life. Leatherface is involved in this whole conspiracy to bring fear towards the government and to help spread fear. I don't know what was going on in this movie. It's just an entertaining shit show to watch. Matthew McConaughey gives it his all in this movie. He did not want this movie coming out. The only reason why this movie did come out is because Renee Zellweger had hit it big with Jerry Maguire, and then his career started to pick up as well. It's an interesting film to watch. I mean, Leatherface is now really into drag in this movie. He is going full on drag queen realness, and you know what? Work, Leatherface. We applaud your look in this movie. However, it was just really off from the original Leatherface. It didn't do me the zhuzh in that respect. Watch this movie because it's a crazy good time, but that's all it's for. That's why you're coming in at 6th place. Coming in at number 5, we've got Texas Chainsaw 3D. So I have to admit, I have never seen the 3D cut of this film. When this film was released, I was actually working for Disney Cruise Line at the time, so on our ship, surprise, surprise, we did not have horror movies playing. So I have not gotten to see a proper 3D cut of this film, so I have to watch it as I'm an audience member just watching it in plain 2D. And what I get out of it, ain't a great movie. Number one, this is like supposed to be a spiritual predecessor to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original 1974 film, yet Leatherface doesn't feel like the original Leatherface. This feels like an entirely different character. Granted, it's years gone by later, but I really didn't like this cousin storyline that they threw in with it, and we're supposed to sympathize through Leatherface through the entire movie. However, it's a step up from the previous Texas Chainsaw Massacre films, and that's why we're going to be putting it 5th on the list. The telling of how they killed the Sawyers at the very start of the film, to me it's just a betrayal of the original 1974 film, and it kind of does try to change the continuity. It's an interesting ride, it's just not a great film, and that's why you're number 5 on my list. Coming in at number 4, we've got Tobe Hooper's classic 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This film is unnerving. The first time I was introduced to Texas Chainsaw Massacre was through the 2003 remake. I was 13 at the time. It was 2 years later that I would go on to see the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it was for a Thanksgiving dinner. We were at my friend's house, and we were about to eat the turkey, but we thought, hey, let's put on this movie. This movie feels so real. It feels so intimate. It feels like you're watching a snuff film. It feels hot. It feels sweaty. It feels muggy. It feels like you're in Texas with these characters. Having said that, some of the characters get annoying very quickly. Franklin's one of them. I think Sally actually does push Franklin into Leatherface at one point. I don't know. Justice for Franklin? I don't know. I saw her hands slip away from that wheelchair as fast as she could, and she started to run. This movie, made in 1974, really did pioneer the slasher genre. Up until this, sure, you had the Italian classics, the giallos, but this really did introduce the slasher genre into the American subculture. A lot of people will think that this is a gory good time as well. However, there is very minimal blood in this film, and that's just because of the psychological impact that this film has on you. The second that you're inside the ride of this character, when you're with Sally Hardesty at the very end of this film, it is just so unnerving because you really do feel like you're being forced into this situation of being placed into a family of cannibalistic serial killers that have just killed all of your friends, and now they're going to come after you. When they strap her to the table at the very end for that dinner sequence, it's chilling, and the fact that she's barely getting away, she's screaming on the back of the truck as Leatherface is doing this chainsaw dance in the background as the sun is coming up over Texas. It is beautiful. This movie, hauntingly beautiful. It's gonna be number 4. Coming in at number 3, and this is gonna sound totally bonkers, but I'm gonna say it. It's gonna be Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. This film was released in 1986, and I really do think it's just pure 80s. The poster alone, they're mimicking The Breakfast Club. Tobe Hooper had to do another film for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. He was contractually obligated when he signed on to do the first Texas Chainsaw. However, his film for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 goes in a totally different route. We're now introduced to characters like Chop Top and Stretch. This film is a comedy. It really does subvert your expectations of what the first Chainsaw movie is. This is a gory fun time. I swear to God, at the end of the movie, when Stretch is just doing her chainsaw dance at the very end on top of the mountain, they're in like this kind of amusement park that the Sawyer family has now taken over, and now they've made it into their labyrinth. It's an interesting ride. The lighting is fantastic in this movie too. Everything is kind of lit with these LED lights. So you've got, a lot of reds and a lot of greens, and I love the way that the different hallways are lit in the different cavern sequences. You've got a crazy cowboy sheriff that wants to take down the family, and there's a great chainsaw fight at the end that just can't be missed. This movie infuses comedy and horror, and I think it does a great job. The sequence on the bridge when Leatherface comes out and he's using the hitchhiker's body from part 1 to wield the chainsaw, it can't be missed. Love this movie. It's just a great time. That's why it's number 3. Coming in at number 2, and now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. We're getting into the great films. 2006's Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. This is part of the reimagining of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise that started in 2003. This was part of the Platinum Dunes takeover. They really did start to redo all the horror movies in the modern 2000s. So you had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, you had the Amityville Horror, then leading up you had the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Street. Michael Bay was really going all out remaking these films. Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, though, I think has all the elements of what a great Texas Chainsaw Massacre should be, especially following up to the 2003 original remake. This movie has great characters, which I think is something that the other Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies are lacking. You don't care for the characters or the situations that they're placed into. However, we already know the Hewitt family from being with them in the first movie. We're getting to carry over those characters. We're getting to learn their origin story of how Leatherface was born, how the sheriff became the sheriff. We knew he wasn't a real sheriff, I mean, come on. But the acting in this movie sells it. The gore in this movie sells it. The fact that the final girl in the last frame of this movie doesn't make it out of life, oh my god, shocked me to death when I saw this in movie theaters when I was 16. But then I thought to myself, well, it makes sense because this is supposed to be the prequel of the 2003 remake, so the family can't get caught. So when Leatherface pops that chainsaw and it goes through her at the very end of the movie and she's in the car, that shocked the hell out of me. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen this movie, but it's just a great ride and you really do feel sympathetic for these characters. There's a lot of suspense, and that's what I think makes a great Chainsaw movie. You've got suspense, likable characters, great atmosphere. I think the early Platinum Dune remakes were great, and this is a great example of how to turn a franchise and reinvent it, but still keep your core audience from the original Texas Chainsaw series. This was genius. This is something that I think Texas Chainsaw 3D and Leatherface could have learned, and that's why this film is coming in at number 2. Coming in at number 1, it's 2003's remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, produced by Platinum Dunes and Michael Bay. This movie premiered in 2003. I was 13 at the time. We snuck into a movie theater to see it. This movie had a really good psychological impact on me in the best way possible. What it did was it turned me on to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. Up until then, I was an avid Halloween fan, loved A Nightmare on Elm Street, but the 2003 remake introduced me to Leatherface because I unfortunately didn't see the 1974 original. This was my first introduction to the series. This is a great reboot, reimagining of the franchise. It keeps the gritty roots of what the 1974 film was trying to do. However, it propels it into a great direction. Jessica Biel is one of the greatest final girls in history of final girls. The second that we see her boyfriend's face peeled off and put onto Leatherface's, oh my god. I felt so bad for Jessica at that point. I was like, run girl, run! And she has the best run out of all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre final girls. The way she runs through the woods is everything. The way the woods has been lit is everything. It's got that beautiful white lights that are just coming through the woods. It looks like moonlight. I was so into it. Leatherface is badass in this movie. Blood is gonna go everywhere. The second he hooks one of her friends, you really feel the brutality in this film. I really do think it works because you care for these characters. Great music, great cinematography. This movie takes everything that I love about the original and just really runs with it. I think if you're looking for a good Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, this should be number 1, besides the original. But I love a good campy movie like Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. But the remake stole my heart. It was the first film that I saw in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. That's why it's coming in at number 1. Well, Halloweenies, how did my list stack up to yours? I'm dying to know. Let me know in the comments. Hit that subscribe notification bell to be notified about all of our upcoming spooky content. Next week, we're going to be reviewing Scream 2. Until next time, avoid guys with chainsaws. Stay spooky.